So the processes are, this categorization of processes are called process groups. The processes we carry out when we are initiating are called initiating processes. The processes we carry out when we are planning are called planning processes. The processes we carry out when we are executing are called executing processes. The processes we carry out when we are monitoring and controlling are called monitoring and controlling processes. The processes we carry out when we are closing are called closing processes. So each of these are like groups of processes. They are called process groups. So you have the initiating process group, which consists of processes carried out when initiating. We have planning process group that consists of processes when you are planning. Executing process group that consists of processes when you are executing. Monitoring and controlling process group that consists of processes when you are monitoring and controlling. And then you have your closing process group that consists of processes that you carry out when you are closing the project. Now let's look at this chart. Let's look at this diagram. What do we see? Clearly we can see the 5 process groups, from initiating down to planning, down to closing. Clearly we can see the 5 process groups, from initiating processes down to the closing processes. Can we describe the relationship between these processes? Okay, let's go through them. As you can see here, starting from the left of the image, when you start a project, you definitely start by carrying out the initiating processes. When you carry out the initiating processes, then you go ahead to plan the project by carrying out the planning processes. After you carry out your planning processes, next that is to execute. You carry out your executing processes. But as you can see from this diagram, there is an iterative relationship between planning and executing. Why? Simply because when you plan, you would always not be able to plan perfectly. You would always get to realize a gap in your planning by the time you start executing. So when you realize a gap in your executing, in your planning, when you are executing, you go back to planning to go and fix the gap. So you are always in that cycle of planning, executing, planning, executing, planning, executing. Because when you plan, beautiful, you go into executing, you realize there's a gap, you go back to planning, you fix the gap, you come back to executing, you try to work it out, you realize even more gaps, you go back to planning, and then once you think you are fine, you go back into the field to execute. So you continue in that iterative loop. Monitoring and controlling is coming in because as you are executing, you are actually still monitoring and controlling. You are actually monitoring and controlling to identify gaps. The identification of gap itself, the cross-checking, the looking, the comparing, the monitoring, looking and checking. Okay, am I doing as I planned? That is monitoring and controlling. And then of course, once you realize there is a gap, you want to ensure you put in corrective measures. You want to ensure you put in some preventive measures. Corrective measures, preventive measures will require you to go back to planning, to go and fix those gaps. And then once you think you have fixed the gaps, you go back into execution again. And then you carry it out. As you are carrying out your execution, you are monitoring and controlling again to confirm, am I going as planned? Have circumstances changed? Are things going as envisaged in the plan? If no, go back into planning again to fix those gaps, to update the plan, to correct the errors, to ensure you put in some preventive measures that you don't fall into those mistakes again. And then once you think you have done that, then you go back into the field again to execute. So as you can see from the diagram, monitoring and controlling is actually done throughout the project. But the core of monitoring and controlling is in that iterative loop of planning and executing. And then if you've executed so well, you've been able to produce your deliverables and you've been able to meet customer requirements, customer has confirmed that is fine, you validated your scope, you have validated your scope, and all your deliverables have been able to get accepted, then you can go ahead and close the project by carrying out closing processes. So all these processes, there are 49 of them, they are carried out at various times during the lifetime of a project. Now, on this other diagram, you can see something, knowledge areas. What are they? Let's look at them this way. If we go back to our analogy of Mrs. George and Mr. George and the food, the 10 processes that we discussed, you'd realize that initially we grouped them in relation to the market. We said pre-market processes, market processes, post-market processes. So we are grouping them in relation to some form of timing of when that process is carried out. You could also group them by another criteria. You could group them by the core nature of the processes themselves. For example, we could say processes that have to do with financials, money. Let's call them financial processes. So that would include examples like collecting money, examples like estimating what you'll be needing for each item on your list. You could also have a group of processes called kitchen processes. That would deal with all that have to do with the kitchen. And many more like that. So now we are no longer categorizing in relation to the market itself now. We are categorizing according to the core nature of the process itself. Now let's bring that thinking to our 49 processes. There are 49 processes in project management, according to Pinbox 6. Those processes were initially, when we said process groups earlier, they were categorized according to the domain, the stage of the project in which the process is carried out. Now, for knowledge areas, we are now categorizing the same 49 processes according to the core nature of the processes themselves. Processes that have to do with risk are brought together, are separated and called risk management processes. Processes that have to do with schedule are brought out and called schedule management processes. Down. There are 10 of them. There are 10 knowledge areas. We have project integration management. The processes that have to do with the core integration of the project, they are called integration management processes. The ones that have to do with scoping of the project are called project scope management processes. The ones that have to do with schedule are called schedule management processes. Then you have cost management, you have quality management, you have resource management, you have communications management, you have risk management, you have procurement management, and then finally stakeholder management. All these are knowledge areas. The various knowledge areas that the 49 processes belong to. So as we are categorizing our 49 processes along the line of the stages of a project, the domains of the project, of project management, we can also categorize them along the core areas, the core sub-nature of the processes themselves. So when we categorize according to the domains, we have 5 process groups. When we categorize according to the core nature of the processes themselves, we have 10 knowledge areas, from integration management down to stakeholder management. Don't forget, never manage a big thing as a big thing, always break things down. Nothing is particularly hard if you divide into small jobs. That brings us to our process table. As you can see from this table, we have a tabular presentation of the 49 processes as they fall into the various process groups. You can see the listing of process groups across, horizontally on top of the table, and as they fall into the various knowledge areas, which you can see as they are listed vertically on the left of the table, in the rows of the table. Let me use an analogy to explain this table. Let's just pick up a character called Mr. Ibrahim. Mr. Ibrahim just finished a 5-year mechanical engineering degree from the university. Let's assume that he took a total of 49 courses throughout the 5-level degree, 5-year degree, 5 years, 5 levels to get the degree. So Mr. Ibrahim took courses throughout 100 level, 200 level, 300 level, 400 level, 500 level. So those courses can be divided into 5. The ones done in 100 level are called 100 level courses. The ones done in 200 are called 200 level courses. The ones done in 300 are called 300 level courses. The ones done in 400 are called 400 level courses. Finally, the ones done in 500 are called 500 level courses. Definitely, every single course that was done in school must belong to one level. Must have done it at some point during your degree in school, meaning that it must have been done at a particular level between 100 and 500. But the same 49 courses that were done can also be categorized according to the core subjects of those courses. For example, out of the 49 courses, some of them are maths courses, some of them are English courses, some of them are physics courses, some of them are chemistry courses, some of them are general studies courses, and some of them are core engineering courses, some of them are statistics courses. So what this means is that the 49 courses can actually be divided again according to the kind of courses that they are. So the maths courses, the courses that have to do with mathematics are called mathematics courses. The ones that have to do with physics are called physics courses. The ones that have to do with chemistry are called chemistry courses. The ones that have to do with general studies are called general studies courses. Note, when we say maths courses, all the maths courses are not done in one level. You could do some in the first level, you do some more in maybe 200 level, maybe you do some more again in 300 level. Maybe 400 level you don't even do at all. You don't do maths courses at all. Maybe 500 level you don't even do maths courses at all. Physics, maybe you could do some maths physics courses in 100 level. You do some more in 200 level and don't do again for the rest of the levels. Maybe you wouldn't even do any core engineering course in 100 level. Maybe in 200 level you do only 2. Maybe 300 level you do 7. Maybe 400 level you do another 5. Maybe 500 level you do 4. So the same 49 courses can be categorized as the courses done per each level. They could also be categorized according to the core nature of the courses. So going by that analogy, coming down to this process chart, to this process table, the 49 processes involved in managing a project can be grouped into 5 process groups. So those process groups in this case would be the levels: 100 level, 200 level, 300 level, 400 level, 500 level. So 100 level in this case will be initiating, planning, then 200 level planning, then executing, monitoring and controlling, and then closing. So your processes here are like those courses. And your subjects, you can also categorize your courses into subjects, just as you categorize them into the levels. So you can also categorize your processes by the nature of the processes, just as you could categorize your courses by the nature of the courses, by the subjects of the courses. So the processes that have to do with scope are called scope management processes. So you would definitely have, just like in 100 level, you could be doing courses. Maybe you do out of, if there are 7 courses altogether you will do in mathematics, you could do 2 in 100 level. And then you do 2 from physics 2 in 100 level. Then you do 1 from general studies, for example. So what this means is, like, in managing a project, when you are initiating the project, you would necessarily carry out processes belonging to different knowledge areas. Just like at a particular level in the engineering degree, you will take courses belonging to different subjects. So if you look at this table now, you would realize that integration management, for example, has processes belonging to every single process group. But when it comes to scope, you only have under scope management processes can be found in just two process groups. That is planning and then monitoring and controlling. So the same way in an engineering degree, you would have courses from some subjects being offered in a particular level and not offered in another level. But all the courses in totality would necessarily be done at one of the 5 levels for engineering, and it would definitely belong to one of the various subjects. So for the 49 processes of project management, all of them would necessarily belong to one of the 5 process groups, and they would also belong to one of the 10 knowledge areas. For every knowledge area, you would have processes that are carried out at different process groups. For every process group, you would have processes that belong to various knowledge areas. And that's what we see here. Integration management is the only knowledge area that has processes in all the process groups. Planning and monitoring and controlling are the only process groups that have processes in all the knowledge areas. So it's important that we understand this fundamental idea, this fundamental concept of processes, process groups, and knowledge areas.